The jacket was hanging on my coat hook when I got home, folded neatly over the arm, like she'd thought carefully about how to leave it. There was a note tucked into the front pocket, 3 words on the outside in her handwriting. "Don't read this." I read it immediately. Inside, in the same handwriting, it said, "I lied to you. The night I said I was fine, I wasn't. The night I said it didn't matter, it did. The night you asked me if there was something I wanted to tell you, and I said no, I was lying then too. I've been lying for a while. I just wanted you to know that. You don't have to do anything with it." She hadn't signed it. She didn't need to. I knew her handwriting the way I knew the sound of her laugh in a crowded room, without having to look. I stood in my hallway for a long time. The jacket smelled faintly like her perfume, which was new information I hadn't asked for and couldn't unknow. I'm going to tell you what the lie was. But first I have to tell you about the jacket. My name is Daniel Reyes. I'm 34. I do structural drafting for a mid-sized architecture firm. The kind of work that sounds impressive at parties until someone asks a follow-up question, at which point it becomes clear I spend most of my days arguing with load-bearing walls on a computer screen. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment I initially justified by calling the second room an office. It is a room with a chair in it. I eat dinner standing at the kitchen counter more often than I would like to admit to a medical professional. I am not, by nature, a dramatic person. I do not chase things. I do not make sweeping declarations. I once returned a library book 17 days late rather than walk in and face the fine, which I am including here as a character reference. Her name was Nora Callahan. She was 32. She worked as a copy editor for a small publishing house that specialized in books I had never heard of, but she could talk about for 45 minutes without stopping. She had dark hair she kept in a braid most days, a pair of reading glasses she wore pushed up on her head even when she didn't need them, and a red pen she kept behind her ear like a threat. She used it on takeout menus. She used it on the ingredients label on my cereal box once. She circled the word artificially and wrote redundant in the margin. We had been best friends for 6 years. We met at a mutual friend's housewarming party where she spent 20 minutes correcting the spelling errors on the handwritten cocktail menu, and I spent 20 minutes watching her do it, which tells you something about both of us. The existing dynamic, the one we had maintained carefully for 6 years, was this. We were friends. Just friends. We got dinner on Thursdays. We texted about everything. I had a key to her apartment, and she had one to mine, which we had both agreed was purely practical, and neither of us had examined too closely. I told myself the reason we had never been more than friends was timing, or compatibility, or the fact that we were too important to each other to risk it. I had a lot of reasons. I cycled through them depending on the week. I did not examine the fact that I could identify her perfume by name, or that I knew which of her silences meant tired, and which meant upset, and which meant she was thinking about something she hadn't decided to say yet. I was, in retrospect, a man standing very close to a fire and insisting he wasn't warm. The jacket entered the picture on a Friday night in October. We had gone to see a film, one of hers, which meant it was subtitled and the ending was ambiguous, and she would spend the walk home explaining why the ambiguity was the point. It had turned cold suddenly, the way October does, like the city had forgotten to send a warning. Nora had come in a light jacket that was not built for the temperature drop, and by the time we stepped outside, she was doing the thing where she crosses her arms and pretends she isn't cold because she doesn't want to make a fuss. I took my jacket off and handed it to her before she could protest. She protested anyway. "Daniel, it's fine. You're doing the thing." "What thing?" "The arms thing. The I'm not cold thing." She looked at me. Then she put the jacket on. It was too big on her. My jackets always are. I have what my mother charitably calls a presence of shoulder, and she had to push the sleeves up twice, and the collar sat wide on her neck, and she looked, in a way I noted privately and filed away under things I am not thinking about, exactly like herself, wearing my jacket. "You're going to be cold now," she said. "I'm from Chicago. This is August to me." She gave me the look she reserves for statements she finds technically true, but philosophically suspect. We walked home. She kept the jacket. This is not unusual. We borrow things constantly. I have a scarf of hers that's been in my closet since January. She has 3 of my books, a charger, and what I strongly suspect is my good spatula. The jacket was just the jacket. Except she kept it for 3 weeks. I noticed, but I didn't say anything. That's accurate and also not the full story. The fuller story is that I noticed and I didn't say anything because there was something about knowing she had it, something I didn't want to name, that made me not want to ask for it back. 3 days after she took it, we had our usual Thursday dinner. She came straight from work, jacket still on. I looked at it once. She didn't mention it. Neither did I. I blame the wine and my own established pattern of not examining things. A week after that, she texted me at 11 at night. Have you ever left something important unsaid because you were scared of what happened next? I stared at the message for a while. Then I typed, yes, everyone has. Then I deleted that and typed, are you okay? Then I sent that instead. She replied, yeah, just thinking. Night. I put my phone down. I picked it up again. I put it down. The following Thursday, she canceled dinner for the first time in 4 months. She said she had a deadline. This was entirely plausible. It was also the first time in 4 months she had canceled, which I noticed and did not say out loud to anyone. The week after that, I asked her, over text, if there was something she wanted to tell me. She said, no. Why? I said, just checking. She said, you're weird. I said, established fact. She sent a thumbs up. The conversation ended. I looked at it for longer than was reasonable. 2 days later, the jacket was back on my coat hook. I read the note 4 times. Then I folded it along its original creases, put it back in the pocket, and sat down on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets, which is not a thing I do regularly but felt appropriate given the circumstances. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment, which is harder to describe than it sounds. It wasn't surprise. That's the part that told me everything. It wasn't surprise. It was something closer to recognition. Like a door I'd walked past 100 times had finally opened, and I was standing in the frame thinking, of course it was this. There was also a secondary sensation, which was something in the region of my chest doing something I could not describe in structural drafting terminology, which is the only vocabulary I fully trust. I have poor emotional reflexes at the best of times. I sat on my kitchen floor and thought about the night she'd asked me if there was something she wanted to tell me. And I thought about the way she'd said no slightly too fast. And I thought about the jacket sitting on my hook for 3 weeks while I found reasons not to ask for it back. I thought, she lied to me. Specifically, she lied about being fine. She lied about it not mattering. She lied when I asked her directly. And then I thought, what was she fine about? What was the it that didn't matter? I already knew. That was the thing. I already knew, in the way you sometimes know things before you're ready to admit you know them. I had known it the night she crossed her arms in the cold and refused to say she was cold. I had known it when she texted me at 11 to ask about things left unsaid. I had known it from the way she'd kept the jacket for 3 weeks and returned it with a note that said, you don't have to do anything with it. She had given me an exit door, written it in pen, and left it on my coat hook. I had poor survival instincts around Callahan women. This was newly established fact. I called her. She didn't pick up. I texted. I read the note. Then I sat and watched the 3 dots appear and disappear for approximately 9 years. Then she wrote, I said don't read it. I wrote, it said don't read this. Past tense, present address. Grammatically ambiguous. There was a longer pause. Then, that's not what grammatically ambiguous means. Then, are you okay? I thought about the fact that she was asking me if I was okay. I thought about 6 years of Thursday dinners and borrowed books and a spatula I was now fairly certain was mine. I thought about her voice the night I'd asked directly if there was something she wanted to tell me, and the 1-beat pause before she'd said no. I wrote, I think we need to talk, not over text. Another long pause. Then, okay. Then, tonight? Then, you can say no. I know it's late. I wrote, come over. She knocked. She never knocks. She has a key, and she uses it, the same way I use hers, because we had decided long ago that the courtesy of knocking implied a distance between us that didn't exist. She knocked tonight. I opened the door. She was standing in the hallway in a gray sweater, her hair down for once instead of braided, her glasses pushed up on her head. She was holding a paper bag that turned out to contain 2 containers of the soup from the place on her street, which she had apparently stopped for on the way over, which was so entirely like her that I felt something complicated move through my chest. "I brought soup," she said, "because I panicked and I didn't know what else to do and the soup place was open." That's a reasonable response to most situations. I'm going to need you not to be funny right now, Daniel. I'm not being funny. I'm genuinely pro-soup. She looked at me. Her expression was the one she gets when she's decided something and is waiting to see if the world will stop her. She stepped inside. I closed the door. We stood in the kitchen. I put the soup on the counter. Neither of us opened it. She was looking at the coat hook where the jacket had been, and I watched her look at it, and I thought, she hung it there deliberately. She knew exactly how I'd find it. "Nora," I said, "let me just—" She stopped. She took a breath. "I've been thinking about what I was going to say for 3 weeks, and now I'm here, and it's all gone, which is very on brand for me. You don't have to have it scripted. I edit for a living. I always have it scripted. Then just tell me the lie." She looked at me then. Her fingers tightened once around her glasses before she put them on. Not because she needed them, just something to do with her hands. She exhaled slowly. "The night you came over after your thing with Gemma ended," she said, "you asked me if I'd ever thought about us differently, and I said no." She paused. "That was the lie. That was the original one. Everything after was just maintenance." The room went very quiet. I remembered that night. It had been 2 years ago. I'd had too much of her wine and asked the question in the tone of someone trying to make it sound casual and failing. She'd said, "No, have you?" And I'd said, "No, just curious." And she'd said, "Good, because this is better." And I had agreed, because I was a man with very good reasons, and I used them often. "How long?" I said. She made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "Which version of the answer do you want? The honest one, or the one I was prepared to give?" "The honest one." She looked at her glasses, then at me. "A while. I don't have an exact date. I noticed it happening, and I thought if I didn't say it out loud, it would stop. And then it didn't stop. And then enough time had passed that saying it felt like too much. And then more time passed, and it felt like even more than that, so I just—" She paused. "Kept the jacket." Something in my chest snapped into place. Not dramatically, just quietly, the way something does when it has been slightly wrong for a long time and finally isn't. "You could have told me," I said. "I know. 2 years ago. You could have just—" "I know, Daniel. You wrote you don't have to do anything with it in the note." "Because you don't," she said, and her voice dropped just a little. "I meant that. I'm not— This isn't a demand. I just didn't want to keep lying. It was getting heavy." She looked at me. "You can say nothing has to change. It won't ruin anything. I'd rather you say it and have everything stay the same than— Nora." She stopped. "I asked you that question 2 years ago," I said. "Do you want to know why I asked it?" She looked at me steadily. Her fingers had gone still. "I asked it," I said, "because I was hoping you'd say yes. And when you said no, I decided you'd answered for both of us, so I dropped it." The room changed, or I changed in it. I watched her face go through something I didn't have words for, something that started as surprise and settled into something quieter and more difficult. "You're not just saying that," she said. It wasn't quite a question. "I'm constitutionally incapable of saying things I don't mean. You've told me this repeatedly, usually as a criticism." She laughed, one surprised sound that came out slightly wrong. She looked away. Then she looked back, and her expression was the one I had seen exactly twice before in 6 years. The one that meant she had put down every tool she used to manage herself, and there was just her, without armor. "I've been your friend for 6 years," she said quietly. "You still are. This is terrifying. I know. If we—" She stopped. "If this goes wrong, then we fix it. We're both unreasonably good at fixing things." I paused. "Also, you still have my spatula." She laughed again. This time it sounded like herself. She shook her head, and I took a step closer, and she went still the way she does when she's decided not to step back. I put one hand at her jaw, very gently, and she tilted her face up, and I thought, of course it was always going to be this. "You gave me an exit door," I said. "Yes. I'm not using it." "I know," she said. "I noticed." We stayed there for a moment, close and quiet, and then she reached up, and her hand closed around the front of my shirt, and she pulled me down. And I went. And it was nothing like dramatic. It was gentle and chosen and unhurried, the way good things are when they've been patient long enough. From the other side of the kitchen wall, her phone buzzed 3 times in a row. She didn't move. "That's my sister," she said against my shoulder. "How do you know?" "She always texts in threes. She learned it from a podcast." "You should probably—" "In a minute," she said. "She'll survive." I did not argue with this. 3 months later, she had a key she no longer needed to knock to use, and I had a spatula she admitted had been hers from the beginning, which she returned with absolutely no remorse. We still had Thursday dinners. The only difference was that now she stayed. A year after that, I came home to find her at my kitchen table with a manuscript and her red pen, her glasses on her nose for once, her braids slightly undone, the reading lamp pulling gold out of her hair. She looked up when I came in and smiled, just briefly, just easily, and went back to her work. I stood in the doorway for a moment. It didn't feel new. It had probably always been her. 3 years later, when people ask how we got together, she tells it differently every time. Sometimes the jacket is the whole story. Sometimes she starts with the soup. Once, at a dinner party, she told the version where I am the unreasonably oblivious one, and she is patient and long-suffering, which received a round of applause I did not feel was entirely warranted. My version is simpler. I asked her a question 2 years too late, got the wrong answer, and decided it was the right one. She kept my jacket for 3 weeks and left a note that said, "I lied to you," and gave me every reason to do nothing about it. I did something about it. She had given me an exit door. I suppose in the end, she had always been better at writing than I was. She just forgot that I would read to the end. What would you have done if someone returned something of yours with a note like that? A note that told you everything and asked you to do nothing? And have you ever kept quiet about something important for so long it started to feel like the truth? Tell me your story in the comments. If this one stayed with you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.